Good afternoon, good morning. Hello, dear participants. It's a great honor to welcome you to the Global Green Growth Week 2022, and specifically welcome you to this session titled Gender Just Interventions for Transformative Climate Action. Before we start, my name is Ingvild Solvang. I will be your moderator today. And I am Deputy Director and Head of Climate Action and Inclusive Development at the Global Green Growth Institute. I have a few housekeeping points before we really get going. As you may know, the GGGW is GGGI's annual knowledge exchange event, which is held in the margins of GGGI's Assembly and Council meeting. And this year we have 34 sessions across the green growth and green transition agenda. And although GGGI is the host of these events, I wish to note that opinions expressed during the GGGW is not necessarily official views of GGGI, but welcome nevertheless, because we encourage inclusive dialogue around very challenging subjects. Translations are available for this session in English, French, and Spanish, although all presentations today will be in English. But if you do need French and Spanish translations, please click on the globe icon at the bottom menu bar in Zoom and select your preferred language. And if you do prefer also, you can choose to tune out the presenter's voice when using translations by clicking off. And I also wish to note that the session today is being recorded, also for future viewing and streaming online. So now, finally, let's begin. And I would like to hand it over to a video greeting from GGGI's President and Chair, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon.
Excellencies, distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome all of you to this year's Global Green Growth Week, organized by the Global Green Growth Institute. Your participation is evidence that we, the global community, demand climate action, and I want to thank you for doing your part to drive and empower green growth. The climate crisis is perhaps the defining crisis of our times. Every year, we can read and hear more and more about the devastating impacts of extreme weather systems, and this year is proving to be one of the worst years yet, with the record floods, the droughts, and the heat waves, all of which lead to displacements from homes, food crises, and wildfires that disrupt and destroy the lives of millions. We are destroying our hope for a better future, and we need to work together to save our planet. I'm pleased to know that so many of you are coming together to exchange ideas, solutions, and best practices on how to advance the implementation of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, the framework which I helped establish during my time as the Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm especially pleased to know that many of you are joining from all corners of the world, including Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Pacific, and many of the solutions to be discussed are coming from women and indigenous communities who are most affected by climate change. I encourage you to take full advantage of Global Green Growth Week and engage with one another as green growth champions and practitioners. The climate crisis will require collaboration and collective action from each and every one of us, because climate change knows no borders, and climate change does not discriminate based on race or social class. we can transform our economies and societies and leave a better future, a sustainable and inclusive future, only if we work together. The challenges will be difficult and there are no shortcuts, but if we work together urgently, I think we can do it. As I have said before, there is no plan B because there is no planet B either. I hope you will join me to make the world a better place for future generations. I wish you very fruitful and successful events during Global Green Growth Week. Thank you.
Thank you also to His Excellency Mr. Ban for that inspiring opening statement. It is an honor to welcome also a fantastic lineup of expert speakers at this session today. I will introduce the speakers as we go. We will have a few presentations and then we will also have a panel discussion and end also with a couple of statements at the very end. Let's begin. Many of the speakers today are members of the Green Growth Knowledge Platform Gender Expert Group that all stand behind the session today. The Gender Expert Group, with members among leading green growth and green economy international institutions, came together under a shared chairpersonship by IIED, UNEP, and GGGI about a year ago, to create a shared stocktake and understanding of how are we doing in terms of effectively integrating gender into just transitions. And we are in fact pleased today to launch and promote an IIED-led working paper titled Gender Equality and Informality in Low Carbon Transitions, a review of evidence to identify transformative outcomes for gender just transitions. So just to kickstart the conversation, let me also point to the bottom menu bar on Zoom, where we do encourage participants to submit questions during the session, and we will try to address those as we go through the presentations and the panel discussion today. As we know, gender is central to the transition towards green growth and low emission resilient development pathways. Women and girls are, as we know, disproportionately impacted by climate change and environmental degradation, but their roles are also instrumental to tackling the multiple planetary crises facing communities around the world. And that means particularly the most vulnerable and disadvantaged communities that are in fact also least to blame for the mess that we are in right now with climate pollution, loss of biodiversity, the plastic crisis and waste crisis, etc. We know that co-benefits of great economic and political transitions that we are now in need of to solve all these challenges. We know that the co-benefits don't automatically benefit all equally. And in fact, history shows that if not adequately managed, we run the risk of making things worse for those already underrepresented in positions of power. And this includes also women, youth, marginalized groups, and last but not least, the informal sector workforce, which in many countries constitute the majority of workers. And in this world of inequalities, the World Economic Forum estimates that it will take 136 years to close the gender gap globally, if we follow the current business as usual. And the transition to green growth and sustainable development offers an opportunity, in fact, to promote gender equality and social inclusion. And the opportunities lay in the sheer scale of the resources and efforts required in the transition required to face the sustainability crisis. And if we were to use finance as a scale of how massive this green transition needs to be, GGGI as an institution has mobilized to date about $7.2 billion in green and climate investments. Now try to multiply that by all efforts by governments, private sector, and institutions internationally, and all the trillions that we know are required to meet the challenge. And it is apparent that the significant resources that are needed can influence the lives and livelihoods of the world's populations, and that also failure to integrate gender and inclusion in green transitions will exacerbate inequalities around the world. There is simply no just transition without gender equality, and we need multiple stakeholders and international cooperation around the table to do it right. And that's what we are here to discuss today with representatives from different stakeholders. And I am now very pleased to hand it over to our first speaker today, Ms. Tebsteteka, who sits in Ethiopia as the director of the Women, Children and Youth Directorate under Ethiopia's Ministry of Finance. So please welcome and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, fellow government officials, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I am Tebsteteka from Ethiopia Ministry of Finance, Gender Directorate, or as you mentioned. It gives me a great pleasure to virtually meet and welcome you all for these important sessions. In last decades, climate-induced disaster had struck all regions of the continent, leaving in its wake destruction of properties such as loss of livelihoods and loss of lives. As we know, disasters have disproportionate impact on gender and particular age groups like women, elderly, youth, children, and people living with disabilities are affected by disasters. The rise of natural and climate-induced disasters is great concern for these categories of the population. Therefore, mainstreaming gender in climate change policies and actions is critical in strengthening the resilience of these vulnerable groups. Can you speak, yeah? Hello? Okay. Strengthen the resilience of these vulnerable groups. Building resilience to vulnerable groups must be addressed within the broader context of policy formulation and addressed within the broader context of policy formulation and implementation. Because of this and other reasons, gender equality and social inclusion doesn't automatically or magically happen. It requires strategy, expertise, and resources. Therefore, towards moving gender-responsive climate actions, we need to recognize that those we are already the most vulnerable and marginalized experiences the greatest impacts of climate change and have the greatest need for adaptation strategies. As women constitute the largest percentage of the world's poorest people, they are most affected by these changes. Further, women's ability to respond to the effects of climate change is limited by the existing gender-based inequalities, such as access to land and other assets, and also limited participation in the decision-making process. Let me use this opportunity to share experience in my country, in particular, Ministry of Finance, towards moving gender-responsive climate action. The government of Ethiopia developed the Climate Resilience Green Economy Strategy in 2011 to achieve a climate resilience middle income economy with no net growth in greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. The strategy also tasked the Ministry of Finance to establish a national climate fund to mobilize climate finance from various sources to realize this vision. Accordingly, in 2012, MOF, in collaboration with the Environment Protection Authority, established and operationalized the CRGE facility to attract climate finance to support the institutional building and implementation of Ethiopia's CRGE strategy. The CRGE facility is managed under the UN agencies, CRGE facility and Regional Economic Cooperation Directorate of MOF, or Ministry of Finance. Since the launching of the CRGE strategy in 2011, the federal government of Ethiopia has been striving to direct its development towards gender-responsive climate-compatible direction and has committed to gender equality as outlined in the National Action Plan for Gender Equality and the National Development Plan. Further, as a party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Ethiopia is working towards gender-responsive climate action in line with the Gender Action Plan agreed in 2017. Due to this, progress has been made in recent years, particularly in addressing some of the gender issues associated with climate change impacts. Example, the fast-track investment of the GRC facility project targeted women and disaggregated its data by sex, such as integration of gender considerations in Ethiopia National Adaptation Plan development process, gender analysis of the intended national determined contribution, or INDEC, and promoting gender budget. Additionally, reaffirming the centrality of gender-responsive and inclusive approach, the CRGE facility, in collaboration with the Global Green Growth Institute as delivery partner, has implemented Green Climate Fund readiness project to enhance the capacity of Ministry of Finance on delivering its climate finance mandate. One of the project properties was a focus on the development of gender mainstreaming strategy to address gender gaps in its climate finance mandates. This CRGE facility gender mainstreaming strategy from 2020 to 2023 is an important first step, one that will enhance institutional capacity to address gender concerns in the climate. That to accelerate gender equality and inclusion in the core operations of the CRGE facility and its implementing and executing entities at various levels. The strategy builds upon findings and recommendations of gender framework of the facility developed in 2017 with support from GGGI, the National Women Policy, and the GCF Gender Policy and Action Plan. Additionally, GGGI supported MOF for establishing gender and climate change community of practice, which is aimed at enhancing coordination and accountability mechanisms for engendering climate action, co-chaired by myself and Women Affairs Director of the Environmental Protection Authority, as well as supporting Ministry of Women and Social Affairs in the development of gender equality and women empowerment policy, with climate change and environment as one of its pillars. GGGI also supported the government of Ethiopia to develop its long-term low emission development strategy, and also its gender and social inclusion chapter through conducting consultations with various ministries and stakeholders. However, the challenge to translate these policies and guidelines into practice remains both in Ethiopia and other countries. Therefore, enhanced gender-responsive climate action, we need to adopt a gender transformative approach, such as incorporate gender lens grant allocation and promote gender budgeting, provide technical support and capacity building, integrate gender issues in the monitoring and evaluation system, such as expertise, data cycle 6, disaggregate data, result chain, and address barriers to inclusion to ensure that women have equal access to project participation in resource assets, technology, climate, information, advocate to promote and increase gender diversity in the workforce and particularly leadership and decision making. Build on indigenous knowledge and recognize women as agents of adaptation, conduct research to build the evidence of emerging good practice and effective strategies on gender responsive climate action. These are what I want to remark. With these remarks, I declare this session open and wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you for your attention. I thank you.
Thank you so much for that great presentation, Ms. Pekka, and thank you also for great collaborations that we with GGGI have with the Ethiopian government, and I'm sure that other agencies also are involved and supportive of your endeavors. I also think it is really, really wonderful to have representation in this discussion from the Ministry of Finance, because as Ms. Pekka is saying, the importance of really steering the resources towards gender equality through gender responsive budgeting and through other financial and economic measures is really, really key, I think, to overcome also some of these challenges that Ms. Pekka so eloquently outlined. So now it's also great now to hand it over to our keynote speaker today, which is Dr. Simon Anderson from the International Institute for Environment and Development, the IIED. So Simon has been one of the chairs of the Gender Expert Group. He's been a force of nature in bringing us together and really lifting the quality of our discussions and conversations around, okay, how do we do this? We have been trying to get this right for a long time. And as Ms. Pekka outlines, we still see challenges. How do we up the ambitions for gender in climate action and green growth, green economy initiatives? So as I mentioned initially, we are pleased today to also share the link to a working paper that has been led by Simon in collaboration with Dr. Susanne Fisher from the King's College of London. So without further ado, Simon, I'm very happy to hand it over to you to speak a little bit about what we have called a gender just transition outcomes framework.
Thank you, Ingvild, and Hello, everybody. It's a real privilege to be joining this conversation today, even more so because a lot of the work that I have been involved with, which has taught me a lot about how to combine gender equality and climate resilience objectives, has been done in Ethiopia. I've collaborated with the Productive Safety Nets program in these areas, and also with other groups across Ethiopia. We're looking at gender equality as part of transition processes towards climate resilience. So thank you very much for the invitation to present some of the work that we've been involved with, and also thanks, of course, to the Gender Expert Group members who supported this work. I want to acknowledge, first of all, Susanna Fisher, who's co-author of the paper that we're launching today. Without Susanna, this process would not have been anywhere near as successful. I also want to acknowledge the support from GGI colleagues who have both technically and in other ways supported this work, and also GIZ. I've put a link to the paper we're going to talk about today in the chat, so you can access it directly. The problem statement that we encountered or generated through the development of the evidence paper was that gender equality outcomes in just transitions need to be ambitious, and to be ambitious they need to be well specified in order to generate and to support effective collective action. The reviews that we did that are set out in the paper show that gender equality outcomes of just transitions are falling short of both what is expected and what is needed. And we've come to the conclusion, and this is not just Susanna and myself, but a whole set of people involved in developing this paper, come to the conclusion that significant investment is needed in ways to make implementation of gender just transitions feasible. As a colleague from the Ethiopia Finance Ministry so correctly specified, there is the need to put resources behind attempts, investments into gender equality. How do we get gender equality into just transition processes? How do the windows of opportunity that arise, both practical and policy windows of opportunity arise? How can we get gender equality outcomes to be part and parcel of what happens through just transitions? And this is the problem statement. If we go to the next slide, please. So to address this problem, one way to do it perhaps is to work out what we want to do. This is where the outcomes framework comes in. We are proposing this framework. It is a framework under elaboration. We will hear how some people have been using it already later in this discussion. But it is an outcome framework that perhaps can be used to scrutinize, that is, to design, to review, and to report on just transitions, and to report and scrutinize particularly the gender equality outcomes. The framework helps to identify which gender equality outcome domains we are interested in, which are the ones that are appropriate to the initiative that we're considering or we're wanting to design. And from there, what are the results indicators that might be set and assessed? It's anticipated that using a framework such as this can be helpful in a strategy to ratchet up gender equality ambitions, making it far more tangible, sharing across stakeholders, what is it that we want to see in terms of gender equality? What should just transitions actually be delivering, and over what time frame? Can I have the next slide, please? The way that we approached this was to consider what has already been done on Green New Deals and green economy. We've looked at a range of assessments of those things, mainly from feminist and feminist economics, and that has informed what we now have as a process towards establishing the domains of change that transitions should achieve if they are to contribute to gender equality, and also to focus in on areas where we can best understand change. So the outcome framework uses 4 steps. We have a characterization of the process, the just transition process. The next step is to set the level of gender equality ambition. What is the current level and what is the level of ambition that the initiative wants to move towards? Then, from a series of domains, choose those that are most appropriate to the initiative that we're looking at. And some of these domains, as I've said, where they've come from reviews of literature, reviews of actual cases, reviews of just transition strategies that are already in place. And we've identified domains of change, including engagement of women and women's agency, alignment and coherence of policy agenda, the centering of care, particularly within changes that are happening through green transitions of productive sectors, looking at the managing the local environment, social economic empowerment, the safety nets that are necessary for gender equality to be achieved through just transitions. The change moves towards collective action. How can women and women-led groups be the agents of change towards a wider collective action and towards gender equality, looking at the norms and discrimination that exist within our societies and economies that are barriers to women's engagement, and looking at ways to change the structure, to enhance structural enablers for gender equality. Having chosen the domains which are most appropriate to the initiative or to the policy or the program that we're applying the framework to, we can then drill down into focus areas within those domains and look at areas where we would then specify indicators of change that could be set as targets, that could be used as in evaluation, and it could be used in a planning process to open up the planning process for the just transition to gender equality outcomes. So bringing in this perspective when just transitions are being designed. The next slide, please. This is a rather complicated and busy slide. Essentially what we have is the outcome domains we've already talked about, and across the top we have immediate, medium term and longer term ambition. These are domains that we would expect to see changes happening if the just transition is contributing to gender equality. And from these, we can then start to specify which are the ones relevant to the initiative policy program that we're applying the framework to. And it gives us a basis for starting to ask the questions of what is really happening, what needs to happen, and what could happen in the future. And all of these areas are related to the domains of change that we spoke about previously. And as I have said, they are drawn not from an imagination or from theory, they are drawn from what critiques of New Green Deals, what feminist approaches to just transitions have actually developed and want to see in practice. Can I have the next slide, please? So the progress that we've achieved so far, we've done the evidence review. We have developed a prototype of the framework, which is being tested, and in collaboration with colleagues in GIZ, we have developed what we call a proposition general paper, making the argument for gender just transitions. At the current time, we're working on a sectorial paper that is assessing gender equality as part of energy generation and consumption, the transition in those areas in sub-Saharan Africa. And we very much look forward to engaging with just transition processes in different parts of the world to see whether a framework such as the one that we have developed, we have a prototype of, could be useful in raising the ambition of just transition towards gender equality. I think that might be the final slide. Yes, so I'd just like to thank you very much. There's a bit of a rush through the framework there. I was trying to keep to time. People that are interested, please email me And I would very much like to enter into a conversation about what's been discussed. And as I say, please do download the paper from the IRD website, freely available for download, and it's up there now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simon. Now I heard somebody else in a previous GGW session this week saying that this is not complicated, it is just complex. So it is obviously a great piece of work that has been laid down to really flesh out along this continuum of ambition. I really like that about the framework. I see you nod, Ms. Teka. I wonder if you would like to come in, Ms. Teka, and give just a little bit of a view of what you have seen here, and what Simon has presented, and whether sort of how you in Ethiopia work to push ambition when you bring gender into climate policies in the context of Ethiopia. Sorry for putting you on the spot, Ms. Teka. I know that this is improvised a little bit, but if you do wish to come in, that would be great.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello? I don't have any comments, but it is very interesting clarification from Mr. Simon that I got that important clarifications. If I got from his email or this document, it is very important. Especially, I impressed with the ambition, not only ambition, it must be, we need this to practical, tangible, it must be tangible. Then to be tangible, we have good policies, strategies, and then we must apply these policies and strategies practically. If we do this one, we'll go to the gender equality things or programs. Then this important document is important for me. If I can get this one, I'm very happy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Teka. And I think the aim of this framework is really to sort of bring us a bit on the same page about what gender looks like in just transitions, and how we can challenge ourselves and our community to think beyond business as usual and really look at how we can push ambition along the continuum from gender sensitive towards gender transformative. And I think that's really important. And I also really like the way the framework is laying it out in terms of time perspective, short-term, medium-term to longer-term perspectives, where we have some great opportunities in Ethiopia and in other countries when we look at the long-term low-emission development strategies that are really looking at a 2050 time horizon, where ambition may kind of take a little bit of that long-term perspective. So I think that was really great, Simon and Ms. Teka. I would like now to hand it over to a practical example, a bit of a real-world example of a gender-just transition project or program being implemented in Colombia. So we have with us Dr. Paula Andrea Vázquez-Cho from the Universidad Autónoma de Occidente in Colombia, and she is implementing an interesting project that I think highlights a few of the dimensions of ambition in terms of gender in classical just transition interventions when we talk about transitioning towards green industries. So Paula, if you're with us, yeah, I can see you, great. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
PowerPoint presentation, okay. Perfect. So thank you very much for letting me share with you this presentation, Leadership and Alliance for Gender Just Transitions, a Colombian Experience. This is actually an applied research project that aims to remove barriers faced by rural women and women in STEM vocational careers in the green industries field. We are a group of women from different backgrounds, from the academia, from vocational studies, rural women, women associations, women from the environmental authorities, working together to try to foster greener and more inclusive industries in Colombia. So about the project, the leader institution is the organization where I work, the Autonomous University of the West. Our partner institution, which acts as the unit of analysis, is SENA, which is our Colombian Institute for Vocational Education, oriented to low-income vulnerable population. The project is funded by a Canadian agency, IDRC, and it is a 3.5 years project. We are actually right now in the 3rd year of the project. So why are we interested in boosting green industries by empowering women in environmental STEM fields? Because we actually in Colombia, and I'm pretty sure in many developing countries, we are facing difficulties with industrial pollution, in particular with the small and medium enterprises. So as you can see in the pictures, we are talking about polluting emissions, improper waste disposal, polluting wastewater. And the point here is that we know that we need to have these STEM green skills, but women are underrepresented in the new green businesses, and in particular in these agricultural activities that require green STEM skills to improve their eco-efficiency. So women are in the agricultural field, but not precisely in the technical knowledge roles, because the rural technological activities tend to be dominated by men. So how are we trying to boost this gender perspective in green industries here in Colombia? So I want to bring here the GEG outcomes framework, because we actually followed some of the steps suggested by this framework, pretty useful. So we started by setting our ambition and purpose, and we said, okay, what we want to do here is to work for green businesses and STEM vocational education with a gender perspective, with a sectoral focus, which is formal and informal rural businesses owned by or led by women, and women in green STEM careers, apprentices from vocational studies. At what scale? Regional level in Valle del Cauca, Colombia. And we want to have these medium and long-term outcomes. Our funding comes from this international agency, but also rural women and having contributions here and the local university too. And the second step was, okay, what is our gender equality ambition level? So we said, we really want to see radical changes here, try to change these harmful gender roles and norms, remove root causes. So we decided to go for a gender transformative approach. Okay, so as recommended also by the GEG framework, we started by using these feminist approaches to green growth and STEM to identify gender gap root causes. So the whole first year, we started reading, okay, which are the factors that are affecting in developing countries that women can really advance in green industries and advance in STEM fields. But also we did a lot of interviews and also surveys with our apprentices, instructors, industries, just to identify the barriers from different dimensions. We identified a lot of factors acting as barriers. At the end, we filtered them and ended up working with 14 factors, but now only brought here 4 factors. Just for example, there are not enough female referents in STEM fields in the green industries. These gender stereotypes that determines the skills and roles and careers that are suitable for men or women in the green field, that managers, trainers, or apprentices themselves maybe limit the women's participation in practical activities. This is necessary to develop green skills, and the lack of training in STEM in specific areas necessary, again, for developing green skills. So we decided to try to remove these barriers. We identified sub-strategies and hard strategies. Sub-strategies are more related to training, gender equity campaigns, trying to inspire, trying to raise awareness, but also, as cleaner production theory says, we need to transfer cleaner technologies by doing, and also to develop green skills in women, we need practical activities. So we decided to apply environmental prototypes, which are environmental transformations based on the adoption of good environmental practices and simple technology in small rural businesses, not complex technologies that women are not allowed, are not able to sustain over time. No, feasible technologies. These are some pictures of the soft extractives. This is a campaign. We interviewed different women that are scientists in STEM fields in the green growth sector that are doing great things here in Colombia. So yeah, we have international women, Colombian women working abroad, but we said, no, we need women from here that live near our cities here in Colombia, so our apprentices and our rural women can feel inspired to move forward in this field. This is another activity that we call My Favorite Female Scientist Workshop. They are also recognizing rural female models in STEM, and technical visits to different kind of industries, to water systems, wastewater treatment systems, but guided by women experts in green industries. So our students can start recognizing these local female STEM models in green industries. Also, as soft strategies, we use different strategies in the field. Here we are playing role games. We were the trainees, they were the professors, and these kind of things, just to create safe spaces to share knowledge. Different talks between SENA apprentices and STEM women in green industries. Practical activities, for example, learning how to separate industrial waste, but inside the classroom. And then we moved to the field and start doing this transformation with this alliance of women. So together, women experts in cleaner production, apprentices, students, and also other kind of expertise. We were all here together transforming a conventional coffee farm, very polluting one, to a greener business. This particular case that I'm showing to you is led by a woman, and she was using a lot of water in the process, and she had untreated discharges, loss of productivity. And then we all together transformed this to the right side. You can see the picture. Now she has a new technology, simple technology, as we call it here, Colombian technology, semi-automatic dry pulping. They are not using water anymore for the pulping part, only for washing. With that simple thing, she reduced 90% of water consumption. And also the physical effort is less, so the technology is adapted to women's needs. Also, we implemented this composting system, and now she is using 100% of the waste, transforming it into something useful for the crops. Here you can see our women working together. She is expert. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving. She is the expert in green coffee. More than 15 years working with the Colombian Coffee Association, transforming these coffee farms. She is our environmental engineer, expert in water treatment, and she is our owner of the rural farm. Okay, as I mentioned, the contributions are also made by the rural farms. So here you can see they are responsible of the construction part. Okay, we complemented the system, the coffee water treatment and the coffee waste system, we complemented with a biodigester system, because in this particular case, this farm also has pork production, and we didn't know what to do with the waste. So we said, okay, let's work together and try to complement the system. We implemented this biodigester system, and now they have biofertilizer that they are using in the coffee crops, and they are now complying 100% compliance, with environmental regulations. Actually, they are using now this gas, natural gas, for cooking. So the women and the family are saving money too. As I told you, apprentices are working all the time together with the female experts in STEM fields. So you can see here the pictures. We are working with them from the diagnosis stage to the implementation and monitoring stage. So they are learning how to calculate water flow, for example, and analyzing water distribution system here, calculating coffee drain areas. They are learning by solving real complex environmental situations in order to develop their green STEM skills. This is another example, apprentices in urban gardening. This is my last slide. So with all this process, learning by doing, learning by interacting, we have seen different changes, different results at different levels. So when one of the apprentices, for example, say to us, I would be the next Colombian women scientist, we feel like, okay, we are inspiring something here. It's paying off in some way. They feel much more confident with this knowledge and their skills in the field. In terms of environmental changes, we saw great significant reduction. And also in terms of organizational changes, now with SENA, we are working in changing their policies at regional level. We are not still at the national level, but we do believe that if we start in this regional level, it's going to, there's an opportunity to replicate it. So now we have changed some of the curriculum orientation. We are incorporating practical activities with female leadership in different training aspects and routines, processes that they have. And also when you hear from Angelita, that's her name, when she tells you, okay, it's good that my coffee and my pork production part is already sustainable, but I want my entire farm to be sustainable. So she's thinking now, it's like we are taking cleaner production to her heart and to the heart of her industry. So we see, okay, we are moving to a circular production model, which is also a great thing for her family, and for the environment. And as our last message for you, the picture that you see here, these are women that are working in Colombia for different green industries. And our message for you is that green industries are possible through women alliances in STEM. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paula, for that very inspiring presentation. I am seeing all different dimensions in terms of sort of your focus and where you are pushing the ambition in terms of improving livelihoods along value chains and promoting women's leadership. I would like to perhaps see whether Simon would like to come in and give a quick comment, also because I saw some really nice references back to the Gender Just Transition framework. So Simon, would you want to come in?
Yes, thank you very much, and felicitaciones, Paula. That was a really interesting presentation. I would actually like to ask a question of you. In this move towards increasing the ambition towards greater gender equality in STEM, and also the way that that women are taking up positions, decision-making positions, in the way that production systems can change towards green objectives, what has been the response from the men? Are the men sharing your ambition? And can you, by sort of using a process of dialogue with those men, can you increase their ambition towards gender equality as well?
That was a difficult part, yeah, because these women, in particular the ones that are working with the coffee farms, they are both married, and in the beginning it was only the husband, yeah, who were talking to us. And we were like, okay, but where is the woman? But is the woman working here with you? We asked them, and they were like, oh yeah, she's in charge too. She's working with the technology. She's in part of it. Okay, but where is she? No, she's in the kitchen. We're like, what? And then we asked for help for our social. There's a social team in because I'm an engineer, and there are many engineers here, but we have also a strong social team. We were like, okay, social team, help us, because if the women are not here, we are not doing anything. We won't invest a single Colombian peso here. And then we started having this dialogue with them and explaining them why we wanted the women to be here, part of here. And now it is amazing, because now women are telling us, we didn't like to speak before, you know, when we have these external visitors, but now we feel comfortable talking to you, because they were like, oh no, let my husband talk. Let my husband explain. Let me know. No, you. And now they feel so different. And men are also so relaxed because we were worried, no, maybe we are going to end with this marriage. But no, the social team was key to manage this. I'm sorry, I cannot give you like a better answer because I'm not part of the social team, but I know they applied a lot of technologies and dialogue and sessions, and they could manage this in a better way.
Really good, very inspiring stuff. And I think let's bring this with us now into the next segment of this session today. We will have a bit of a panel discussion. We have three members of the gender expert group with us. I will introduce them now, and we will do a little bit of a discussion with them. So I'll start by introducing Najma Mohammed, who is Policy Director at the Green Economy Coalition, with a wealth of experience for years working with the ILO and UNPH and others on just transitions and gender. So thank you very much, Najma, for joining us. I also wish to introduce Ursula or Ulla Becker from GIZ, who happens also to be one of those wonderful engineers, chemical engineers, with a keen interest and expertise in the gender field. So I like to say engineers who get gender are worth their weight in gold. So it's really, really great to have you with us, Ulla, as well, to present a bit from the GIZ perspective. And last but certainly not least, we also have Nina Kolibashkina, who is a Senior Social Development Specialist at the Climate Investment Fund, based over in Washington. Also bringing in a wealth of experience and a real passion for gender in climate action and involvement of communities and workers in just transitions. And so thank you all very much for joining us. So let's perhaps do a bit of an exchange here in terms of what you've heard just now and the experiences that you come to the table with. And from experience to also some of the challenges that you have experienced in getting it right, because we know also that, you know, in some ways we know what needs to be done, but we have evaluation after evaluation after evaluation telling us that it's possible to cherry pick good examples like the one presented by Paula. But are we really able to move the needle in terms of bringing gender really to the forefront of just transition and transformative green and low emission development initiatives? So should we start with you, Najma, if you don't mind going first? And then perhaps we can go to Nina and then to Ulla.
Thank you so much, Ingvild. I hope you can hear me. I mentioned to you my internet's not the greatest today. Thank you. So a fantastic presentation from Paula that has actually reflects so much of the richness that I wanted to share. I mean, I think when we speak about just transitions, and both as a member of the gender expert group and someone who's worked on just transitions, it's wonderful to see an example that illustrates how change can happen in the real world. And thank you, Paula, for sharing the challenges. And I think one of the lessons that Paula very eloquently shared was that they had really technical experts, and I'm sure people working out the business models and the technical solution and the social dimension working together. And so it's really wonderful to see that sort of integrated approach, because we are in just transition speaking about an economic and a societal transformation that will happen at different paces in different places. So I really loved the richness of the example. Thank you, Paula, for sharing that. I think already, Ingvild, we are seeing many countries are elevating the ambition to address gender equality in the climate actions. We're beginning to see the enhanced nationally determined contributions express the ambition to go towards, you know, more gender responsive and transformative approaches. But I think a lot of my experience has shown, you know, working with people in different places, designing just transition strategies, that we're still very much at the entry level of integrating gender into investment plans, into how we design policies. And we really need systematic integration in strategies, finance plans, and we need the type of frameworks that we're developing to actually guide and support those who are at the forefront of implementing these actions. And unfortunately, gender is still an add-on in just transitions. We're still playing the numbers game. You know, how many women beneficiaries, how many women have attended meetings, not knowing, do those women speak? You know, what are the tangible benefits in their lives? I think one of the real benefits of the outcomes framework is the identification of the domains of change, you know, empowerment, agency, social protection, integrating and understanding women's involvement and engagement in the care economy. I think it really provides a holistic way to ramp up gender equality ambitions and to identify what drives women's vulnerability and exclusion. And I think it's definitely a tool that I know many practitioners will welcome, you know, to add into their repertoire. And very often, Paula, many technical experts, engineers, scientists are thrown in the deep end of trying to implement transformative climate actions, but then hitting, you know, some of the barriers. And it was wonderful that you were able to work, you know, with the social team. And definitely, Ingrid, there's a lack of tools and frameworks available. It's wonderful to see how the team in Colombia started applying some of the work. And as the group, we hope that this can be put into the real world, used on projects, plans, and that we begin to see, you know, where we can go forward. I do think to share, you know, a positive side is that where we already have gender responsive planning or budgeting in place, it's much easier to then bring, you know, bring that expertise into just transition planning. But unfortunately, it's often still very siloed. I think I'm going to stop there and look forward to hearing what the other panelists have to add.
Great, thank you so much, Najma. So Nina, you have a presentation also, that's great. Please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to have a little bit more structured response to this really exciting panel where, you know, we've started from looking at from the point of view of the government, just how important the issue is in the climate finance. We moved on to very inspiring work that Simon, together with the Gender Working Group, led in really setting the normative framework, the ambition of like where we need to go and how and why theoretically. And then looking at the presentation that Paula made to talk about how, you know, practically what are the challenges of really on the ground. And Najma started to really pull it all together really nicely. I wanted to use the example of the organization that I work for, the Climate Investment Funds, to talk a little bit about experience, challenges, but also some of our ambitions and vision. So Climate Investment Funds is basically a finance facility to provide concessional finance to low and middle income countries. It was set up a number of years ago and has been evolving in its approach to its work. From the onset, it worked on clean technologies, energy access, climate resilience, sustainable forests. But in the last few years, we've identified new frontier challenges related to transition from coal, smart cities, nature-based solutions, and industry decarbonization. We currently, the operating budget that we have is around $10 billion. But what we find really important that it's not the main, money is not the main product, because we see that really as a key to unlocking de-risking finance and bringing contributions from other stakeholders to really have a very comprehensive approach. Our business model is unique. Our projects are implemented through the multilateral development banks, but through our programs, we start with a country-led programmatic participatory approach. So bringing all the MDBs together with national stakeholders, ensuring that civil society is involved to start by developing investment plans for the country within the program, and then within it addressing. Obviously, the main focus is on really technical and policy level, but also thinking about social inclusions and co-benefits. So within that model, gender from the very beginning was a consideration, but if we use the approach that Simon was presenting in the framework, in the beginning it was more gender informed. Okay, well, we need to do something about gender. How do we tick the box? And sorry, on this slide, I wanted, that was, this slide. So with gender informed, we've had examples of, various requirements. Okay, a number of women needs to be consulted. There should be some quota. If there is a training, there should be women. And some of it, I think we shouldn't really discount that altogether, because there is some value in that approach as well. And when I talk about the evolution of this approach to gender integration, I don't mean that we've abandoned one and moved to another. We're building, it's like the building blocks. So within the gender responsive approach in the last few years, we've started to look a little bit more clearly at the sector that each project is addressing, and what are the women's specific needs? What are the gaps in access to markets, access to services, access to resources? And through these wider project activities, what can we do? And of course, in some cases, those initiatives are small, or we are piloting some approach, or we're really incorporating it to a broader activity. Examples include skills trainings, specific requirements for access to credit, for example, introducing alternative collateral so that women can actually access the resources in cases where they don't have property that is in their name. On land and resources, we, for example, had projects where including land tenure for women, including and formalizing their rights, was a condition for project funding. So at least on the project level, we were starting to change the narrative. And with technology, a lot of emphasis on clean cooking, electric stoves, and various clean energy solutions, but that are targeted to the women needs and to the types of businesses that they're supporting. And similarly, in access to services, looking at transport, looking at energy and water sectors, and looking at also social protection and GBV prevention in those types of projects. But in the past 3 years, and just 2 years ago, we adopted our new gender strategy. We started to think more about gender transformative. So, all of this is nice. And yes, definitely we are addressing some women-specific needs, but that's not enough to really start changing all those problems that created those gaps in the first place. With gender transformative right now, and I have to be very honest, this is the ambition. So this is the vision, and kind of drawing on very much on the framework that Simon was sharing. We're now looking at ways how in the new programs that are currently being designed, we can look for opportunities to go from small issue, like if we use land tenure, if it was a condition just for project funding in this province, what can we do when the sectoral reforms are being considered? How can we start looking and applying gender lens to those sectoral strategies? When we're looking with private sector investments, what incentives, including financial incentives, how can we make this access to concessional finance conditional on meeting the gender smart investment criteria or developing gender action plans by those private sector companies? How can we look at STEM not as let's introduce a couple of trainings here, but really like on the government policy level, from the education to working in the sector, to making sure that women can access those jobs but also stay in those jobs, and what are various services, including childcare provision, etc., that are needed in order for them to stay working and growing in the sector. And the other very important aspect, which Simon talked a lot about, is the governance, voice and agency. So in all of that, how can women play more of a leadership role? We have a collaboration right now with IAAD and Gen Collaborative, where we're coming up with a knowledge product on women climate leadership. But again, we're trying to make it not very theoretical, but very applied, with specific actions that we can then take and integrate into new programs. And the same, looking for ways to really involve women groups in design and implementation. I have more slides, but I'll talk about them at the solutions part. Over.
Yes, and let's see how much we have time to cover. Now we are running a bit low on time, but let's do the round of the solutions later and to get back to you, Nina, on that. GIZ and Ulla, please,
yeah, thank you.
Your response to all of the above. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm not on all of above, but I'm very glad to be part of this event, although I feel I cannot really contribute too much in in having nitty-gritty details and really clear measures and activity plan ideas in which way we actually can move forward this transformation. But the one thing I wanted to emphasize in here is that, and that also Najima has already said, like we of course have also to change the framework. And for the framework, I thought like I can introduce a little bit strategies that came up in the last year recently, or in regards from the German government, to indicate, well, what does Germany have in mind when we talk about women engagement in climate change. So in that, bringing back from where I come, I'm working for GIZ. That's a federal enterprise with worldwide operations, as many of you will know. We support the German government in the fields of international cooperation and for sustainable development and international education. And the vision for us is to assist the people in actually becoming a better future. Having said so, we depend, of course, on our funding and commissioning bodies, and that is part, to a very large part, the German government, but also a European government, but still a lot of projects are commissioned by the Ministry for Cooperation and Development. And there the new minister, Svenja Schulze, announced in February this year that she emphasized that the adoption of a feminist development policy. That is something we are now striving for in Germany, but also, of course, in the country when we are thinking about development policy. And that feminist development policy, as you also things mentioned before, you said it's an approach, of course, it's a strategy, and it needs to be human rights based. It needs to be power critical. It's gender transformative. It should work, and it's intersectional. You said like there's a lot of silos, Namir, and we have to bridge them in a way. So the policy is generated in a way that it cooperates at multilateral level. It supports feminist civil society and representative organizations. And of course, as this is the strategy that is set out by the ministry, GIZ as an institution and organization which is implementing, we also are bound to take our piece in forming and implementing such kind of strategy. Core element of it is, and that is something where I see a close relation to the framework we have elaborated in this and discussing today, that is that there is a gender action plan, and that action plan should translate the feminist strategy into concrete measures. And these measures then might be implemented in the project. So I believe this perfect slide, Simon, you showed with the different stages and options that could be very well used when we think about how to design projects in the future. Regardless of the BMZ, of course, also the Ministry for Environment, Nature Conservation, Nuclear Safety and Consumer Protection also expressed in a lot of different occasions that a gender responsive approach to environmental policy, including transformative climate action, needs to be pushed. Therefore, they have their gender strategy. And this strategy is part of Germany's International Climate Initiative, which is the main funding body for climate and biodiversity related international cooperation projects. And it also has a clear indication that there will be, there's a timeline, there's concrete activities, and there is a gender action plan, which then should be followed and implemented. In that regard, maybe also the idea on how do we as GIZ deal with gender. I fully agree, in the past it was an add-on. Let's count the number of women in the meetings. Let's see if what we can do on a project level in measures to invite and involve women in a better way. But it very seldom was actually that the whole project was set up to integrate gender into the main setting and also into the policies which the project wanted to change or wanted to elaborate. And to have more of this thinking about integrated approach, the GIZ formed a gender strategy, first in 2012, but later on revised it in 2019. And it's also very closely monitored. We are quite pushed by our executive board and our leading bodies to establish gender focal points. These are on department level, but also on corporate unit level and on project level, to support the implementation of the strategy, meaning that there is one focal point in the project which actually has to do the job to think ahead of gender aspects and ideas before we get into action and before we start elaborating examples and policies. We do have gender award and gender week, so there's the feeding in of good experiences also into the larger GIZ family. So maybe that for the ideas, I think the framework would be great to have a closer look at. So I downloaded the paper, of course, already as well. I'm really happy to see in which way it formed, because we also had been part of the group to initiate it and fund it. So I think it's a really great result, and it will give the project which I'm representing, the Green Economy Transformation Project, a great starting point also to work on our inclusion parts, because inclusiveness is one of the topics we will foster in regards to bringing forward a green transition. Back to Ingrid.
Great, thank you so much for that, and for highlighting also this feminist foreign policy, which I feel from our perspective in GGI really also provides a good leverage in our program to bring this forward as part of international cooperation, which hopefully also is helpful for national governments, and the presentation of Ms. Tekka earlier. We will get back to that a little bit with a brief statement from the government of Luxembourg as the closing act of today's session. So looking forward to that. But let me just give Nina and Najma another opportunity now to reflect on what was now presented by Ulla, and sort of solutions and ways forward now. So perhaps a 90-second presentation for Nina and Najma. Starting with you, Najma.
Thank you, Ingvild. So I'm not going to go into the examples, because I really wanted to share, concrete examples where you see this ambition come to life. I don't think we can talk about transformative climate action without setting the ambition for gender transformative responses to be built into the design and financing and planning of interventions. I think we need to do a lot of work to train the teams that are responsible for delivering projects and initiatives at country level. I really loved the Colombian example to bring in, the integrated skill sets, because I wouldn't expect as an engineer or as a sort of an aquaculture and agriculture specialist to have the facilitation skills to deal with the social dynamics that you have to deal when you're wanting to address gender norms that are harmful for women. You need the kind of skills to be able to engage meaningfully and to achieve, gender transformative climate actions. I mean, I think that the framework is a great addition to the toolkit that we have. It'd be wonderful to see the kind of big actors that we have, the climate investment funds, GIZ, to begin to support, the testing of this framework through the investments and the projects that they fund and that they support. But I think also we need to look to the places where we really have seen, some really transformative actions taking place. And I think for me, just to close, Ingvild, and this is probably just a lesson for us as well as a gender expert, it's very, we know that, gender justice, and you quoted some of the statistics, is incredibly hard to work on. We don't have another 100 odd years to address the gender gap. We've got to do things, we've got to be able to meet the sort of social, ecological and climate challenge that we have simultaneously. But I think we shouldn't lose sight that for transformative climate actions, we need to look at this with an intersectional lens, how characteristics such as gender, race, place, age, and geography actually intersect and reproduce and reinforce disadvantage and discrimination. And to make sure that when we design just transition plans and actions, they benefit as many people as possible. And I think, you know, that this is fantastic work that contributes to that thinking. There's always more work to be done, but it's been wonderful to hear the discussion and to get the inspiration from the ground. Thank you, Ingo, for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Najma and Nina.
I lost the mute button. I'm really tempted to very quickly show a couple of slides. I don't know if you can see the slides. So one of the very practical examples of where we are applying the framework is one of the new programs that SIF has launched. And just today we were reviewing the investment plan for Indonesia, yesterday for South Africa. So it's like really in the making right now, which is it's a dedicated mechanism to really accelerate transition to clean energy from coal-powered energy while supporting socioeconomic goals and environmental remediation. And the investment plans that were presented at the Trust Fund Committee had already a very significant emphasis generally on people. It's actually one of the pillars of the program. So we have the governance pillar looking at the policy and things that need to happen, but also the people, like what are going to be the support policies by the government to the people that are affected, and then what is happening around infrastructure. And within that, we worked really hard to look at gender at every part. So looking at the governance pillar and drawing on the outcomes areas of the framework, we identified a range of different relevant activities, both kind of really mainstreaming gender lens in policy making, but also ensuring participation of women groups, and we're developing specific actions related to that. On the pillar related to people, which is really hitting a lot of outcome areas of the framework, we're looking at the social inclusion activities. We're looking at how to work with the private sector that will be supported through those investments. We're looking at how, when we're looking at social protection, what are the angles from gender perspective, but also thinking about norms and behavior change, because without that, it would not be possible to sustain change. And under infrastructure pillar, we are also looking at various activities that are related to the role of local communities, and especially women, as well as indigenous people. And then our work with the private sector and changing the culture of the private sector energy providers to really make it much more inclusive. We also understand that these are what we call gender mainstreaming or gender integration activities, but we acknowledge that might not be enough. So additionally, we received some funding from Canada and currently fundraising for more finance for a grant mechanism that will be used to specifically channel some funding to women organizations. So it's one thing to involve them, but do they have the capacity? Can they really afford to sit at all those meetings? How they will get involved? And this is our vision through this grant mechanism, to really work in a sustained manner throughout the lifetime, all those projects of all those investment plans in the country, to target gender outcomes related to ensuring that gender equality is considered in transition strategies, that women groups have improved leadership skills and decision-making capacity, are able to influence decision-making, that gender-specific impacts of transition are mitigated, that redeployment and social economic reintegration regeneration programs take into account women, especially also women working in an informal sector, which formally would not necessarily have to be targeted by some of those measures, and that also that the enterprises that are starting to then develop clean energy are socially responsible, and that the share of women-led or enterprises is growing. So this is our vision, still to be done, and we're very much looking forward to continued cooperation with the gender expert group in implementing that vision. Thank you.
And we share that enthusiasm for further collaboration. You always lift the quality of our conversation. So thank you so much for presenting that as well. And I think with that, although I would have loved to continue the conversation with the panels and also have a bit more discussion with involving Simon also as a response to what was said, I think unfortunately, in the interest of time, we have to move on towards the last part of this session today. We have two closing statements today. The first one will come from the future, which is the young professionals that have been engaging with the gender expert group. We've been working with 4 graduate students from the Geneva Graduate Institute in the International Development Studies program, where they have undertaken some applied research with us to actually field test the gender just transition outcomes framework that has been presented today on a number of GDDI projects. So I introduce to you now Giuliette Miatello, Ina Mian, Carlotta Osti, and Alexandra Wenzel. Great to have you with us. I will hand it over to Juliette to start with a brief statement from you. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are very delighted to be part of this panel and to have worked in close contact with JJJI for almost 9 months now during the preparation of our final report, Gender in Just Transitions, an application of the Gender Just Transitions Outcomes Framework. And in the following time, we will summarize our main takeaways from our research. First of all, we delve into the deep nexus between climate change and gender and its importance for a transformative just transition. In fact, there is no climate justice without gender justice. The framework has been designed precisely to grasp these 2 dimensions, focusing on gender ambition in the context of just transition. Hence, the framework, in our idea, is a very good diagnostic tool, assessing the gender level and highlighting extensively the existing gender gaps of policy documents. Furthermore, the framework can really act as a bridge between gender experts, academia, policy analysts, and the reality on the ground of government policies. Ina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Juliette. So in our research, given that informal work was a characteristic that the framework featured, we had to consider the informal sector and its linkages with gender and just transition. This is important because of the invisible nature of informal work and women's work, such as unpaid care. This has important consequences for just transition and the transformation of existing production and consumption systems. So what we found in our research was heterogeneity in national policy regarding the consideration of the informal economy. One country, based on their nationally determined contribution, for example, set out to explicitly formalize recycling and recycling organizations. In another case, the NDC focused only on the formal sector. Furthermore, despite informal work being such a significant aspect of their developing economies, no reference was made to either formal or informal sectors in 2 of our case studies. Overall, there was no reference made to the disproportionate work that women do in terms of unpaid care. So what we found was that there is a lot of room for the concept of informal work and the informal economy to be unpacked, and for governments to fully address this and understand the gender terrain of the informal economy and how it needs to be tackled to ensure a just transition. Next, I pass the floor on to Alexandra.
Thank you. So another notable finding of ours was the critical importance of incorporating the country context beyond solely applying the framework to one policy. For example, one of the countries which had the highest gender ambition of our case studies was found to have strong policies historically, but low likelihood for these policies to be effectively implemented due to a variety of reasons ranging from entrenched inequalities to insufficient budget. So while the framework is most certainly beneficial to understanding the ambition of a set policy, the analysis cannot be understood in isolation and therefore must also be complemented by a thorough understanding of the country's context to have more meaningful findings. I will now pass it over to Carlotta.
Climate change and just transition is a great premise, and the framework attempts to unpack such a connection. Yet there is the need for more understanding of the wide variety of gender ambition. A framework needs to start from the assumption that gender in most cases is not considered. Therefore, the framework needs to speak with an audience having a minimum understanding of gender to be effective. And on a concluding note, we saw here the importance of including academia in this process, as it is able to incorporate necessary yet underobserved metrics, drawing on different methodologies, ensuring that the design of a framework is very thorough. But academia needs to be conscious of how it translates in practice and with the end users. So speaking on behalf of the group, we'd like to thank you for your attention, and Ingvild and everyone at JJJI for supporting us during this great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contributions to our work. I so much echo the secret message that I have been passed from Najma in the chat here on the side, which says that the future looks bright listening to these young women leaders. So I can happily declare that I'm about to retire soon and hand it all over to you. So this was really great, and really great to collaborate with you on this. We would have loved to hear more from you, and hopefully we will at a different occasion. We have now come, unfortunately, to the end of our time, and I am very, very, very pleased to welcome the last and final speaker for the closing act of today. It has been mentioned by Ola today, this importance of feminist foreign policies. And I am here now with the government of Luxembourg, who, as you know, they are implementing a feminist foreign policy, which is seen also in the OECD DAC overview of countries and financiers of ODA that are linking gender with climate action, where Luxembourg actually tops the list. So we end on a very optimistic note, I hope, with our colleague Virginie Gilbert from the Development Corporation. She's a Development Cooperation Officer at the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs in Luxembourg. So thank you so much for joining us, Virginie. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Does all work well? Yes. Perfect.
Everything
Thank
perfect.
you so much. So as you mentioned, well, good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. And thank you for all the contributions. I listened with great interest, and I agree the future is bright. I think it's already a great step forward that a major event on climate change like this one can no longer take place without gender equality being addressed. So thank you for that also. I work at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Luxembourg. I've been working here for 3 years now. I was working in Central America before, also working with development cooperation. So now I still work on development cooperation but with the political part in addition, which makes it even more interesting. So in Luxembourg, we have a clear position that since climate change is a global challenge that requires global solution, foreign policy must also do its part. So I wanted to offer a few thoughts on this. The impacts, as we've been discussing here, the impacts of climate change are not gender neutral. Women are at the forefront of climate impacts, their vulnerability often being more significant and their resilience hampered because of their different roles, socioeconomic status and position in the social ladder. And yet women, and we've talked about it tonight, yet women are powerful agents of change in the prevention, community mobilization and dissemination of climate change practices. They're important stakeholders in the implementation of development strategies. And yes, we saw a few examples before with Paola's presentation. I loved the whole project and how it made it possible to empower a whole community of women. So promoting gender equality is not just about doing the right thing, it's about doing work that works. It's an equation that's easy to do in terms of development. It's a question of identifying needs and how can we seriously claim to know what the needs are if we forget to ask half of the population. So it's about asking their opinion and understand what they need, ensure that women are included in the decision-making bodies that are still way too often led by men. It's not enough to ensure that half of the participants in training courses or other things are women. That's not enough. We cannot call it gender mainstreaming, and I think this was also very clear in Paola's presentation. So advancing gender equality was always important, but requires now increased efforts as the COVID-19 pandemic has slowed or even reversed gender equality gains, and at the same time, anti-gender and other forces opposing gender equality and women's rights remain active, which we also have to be careful with. Like a week ago, a country, I won't say name, announced that it will no longer apply the country's feminist foreign policy launched in 2014 in their country, saying the label could be counterproductive. So according to them, the expression of feminist foreign policy risks to cover up the content. So this is not good news, because Sweden has been one of the, now I said it, has been one of the leading countries in defending women's rights. But at the same time, this is also one more reason why Luxembourg is looking at giving even more visibility to our feminist foreign policy, which we have been actually explicitly advocating for since our political program of 2018. So now since then, Luxembourg has been one of the 5 countries now, I think, that are officially applying a feminist foreign policy. But even before that, the commitment to gender equality and the promotion and protection of women's and girls' rights has been a long-standing priority here, and an integral part of our external action and human rights policy, including in our cooperation work, where gender is really put at the center of our efforts. So we revised 2 policy documents last year, the gender strategy on one hand and the environment and climate strategy on the other hand. We didn't want to mix the policy papers, but we developed them in parallel so we could directly apply the mainstreaming of these themes, which is the minimum we require from our partners. So we had a similar process of reflection than the one presented by Simon before. We have also ended with documents that make you dizzy because there's so much work to do. I think Ingvild said it, it's not complicated, but it's very complex. So there are a few documents actually that I saw tonight that I would love to receive, but so much for the little discussion. Back to Luxembourg strategy. So based on these strategies, we developed an internal action plan to 2030 for monitoring, evaluation, where all ministry desk is involved. And we developed also 9 tools and still developing more, but we're developing tools for us here internally, but also for our partners, for Lux Development, our implementation agency, for the NGOs and so on, and each one is tailored to its target audience to ensure that everyone has the means to contribute to the implementation of these strategies, gender and climate, climate and gender, and of course gender and climate in any project or program. So the idea with these new strategies and tools is to have this gender climate nexus that is not an option anymore, because it cannot be an option anymore. And I've been to the field. I've been to Asia in September to also test these tools with the field, with people working on the implementation in the field, and it's looking good so far. So we're in a good place. We also have, as you might know, Luxembourg has a special situation that in addition to ODA, we have a separate climate fund that is managed by another ministry, by the Ministry of Environment, through a managing committee where I'm also representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the Ministry of Environment also launched a new strategy last year to frame the new climate budget and putting a very high focus on gender too. So this is really like the new approach that is shared with all ministries. It's like a whole of government approach that we're also applying to this gender and climate nexus. It's a question of ensuring that including these issues are no longer optional. So if we want our work to lead to something efficient, we just cannot make it optional anymore. So this increases the relevance of our projects. It increases ownership on the field. It increases efficiency. And for I'm going to stop here and just say that our next step will be to develop some trainings for everyone, to also maybe learn how to use the tools for the more complicated tools. And we are convinced that it's only through a trained staff, a network, a coherent approach within governments and other organizations too, actually, and a strong and permanent political commitment to climate change, but also to gender equality, that we will be able to achieve our goals. That's it. Thank you for having me today, and thank you for listening. Back to you, Ingvild.
Thank you so much for that, Virginie, and thank you for your partnership with all of us in making this happen. We have come to the end and beyond. I think that this has really been a wonderful session where we've really seen different stakeholders, government, academics, policy experts and practitioners, financiers, both in terms of ODA and development banks, coming together to discuss how do we sit at the same table and find solutions to bringing gender into just transitions. So I leave this session really inspired. We will, in the coming weeks and months, have released the how-to guide on the gender just transition framework that Simon is leading on. So we will be supporting him towards that document coming to the point where we can share that also widely. So I think that will also be the opportunity to reconvene and again dive into the solutions and all the wonderful examples of how this can work and how we can be ambitious on gender in just transition. So with that, thank you all so much for coming tonight. Have a wonderful afternoon, evening, or day, depending on where you are, and we will be in touch. Thank you and goodbye.